Hello, everyone. My name is Mihoko Kumamoto. I am Director for UNITA's Division for Prosperity and the Hiroshima office. Welcome to UNITA's Ideas That Matter series. Today's topic is pursuing inclusive disaster risk reduction. I would like to start by expressing special appreciation to the organizations that have made this session come true. The people and the government of Japan, Wakayama and Hiroshima prefectures, and United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. Thank you so much for all your support. Today is a perfect day to think about this topic, as November 5th is a World Tsunami Awareness Day. And we live in a strange and uncertain time as we faced with COVID-19 and also multiple natural hazards such as tsunami, earthquake, typhoon, hurricane, drought, and many others. And we are constantly thinking, how can we cope better with these multiple hazards? So on this Tsunami Awareness Day, we are very much looking forward to hearing from guest speakers and learn from their experience and knowledge. I would also like to mention that in 2016, United Nations Institute for Training and Research, UNITA, started a training program on disaster risk reduction and women's leadership. And over the past 4 years, more than 120 female leaders from Pacific small island developing states have participated in this training program. And it is great that we have one alumni from this training program as one of the guest speakers today. Right, okay, great. Now I would like to introduce 3 guest speakers who are going to share their perspectives and knowledge and experience with us today. The first speaker is Mr. Yasutomo Morita, Superintendent of Emergency Management from Wakayama Prefecture. Wakayama Prefecture is one of the leading local authorities in promoting disaster risk reduction. Wakayama experienced Ansei Nangkai earthquake tsunami in 1854. Since then, the Wakayama Prefecture has been promoting many innovative disaster risk reduction. So I'm very looking forward to hearing their experiences today. So welcome, Mr. Morita, and thank you. Great. And the second speaker is Miss Eun Hideos. She is a graduate student from Sophia University. She is also an alumni of UNITA's training program on disaster risk reduction and women's leadership in 2018. Eun is originally from Palau, and for her bachelor's degree, she studied environmental studies at Chaminade University of Honolulu. And after some work experience, she moved to Japan and currently doing master's degree at Sophia University. So it's a great pleasure to have you on board, Eun, and thank you so much for joining. Great. And we have one more speaker who is not online yet, but he should come online shortly. His name is Dr. Rajiv Shah, professor at Graduate School of Media and Governance at Keio University in Tokyo, in Japan. Dr. Shah has extensive experience in disaster governance, community-based disaster risk management, climate change adaptation, urban risk management, and disaster and environmental education. In addition to his current position at Keio University, Dr. Shah is also the chair of the United Nations Science Technology Advisory Group for Disaster Risk Reduction, and also co-chair of the Asia Science Technology Academic Advisory Group. He's also coordinating lead author for Asia chapter of IPCC 6th Assessment Report. We are very excited to have these three distinguished speakers with us today. Today's session consists of 4 parts. Number 1, we have received some video messages from distinguished guests. So we are going to play these messages first. And number 2, we are going to have a short presentation from each speaker. And number 3, we are going to have a dialogue among these guest speakers to learn more from their experiences. And finally, we are going to have a Q&A session. Thank you very much. We are going to move to the first part, which is video messages from distinguished guests. The first video message is from Her Excellency Miss Palavau Karina Jacqueline Silla Tualao Lei. She is Ambassador of Samoa to Japan. Please play this video message. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, Talo Falava. I'm honored to be invited to deliver a few remarks during this special session of the 5th UNITAR Ideas That Matter series commemorating the World Tsunami Day 2020 and highlighting the importance of disaster risk reduction in our time, especially in small island developing states like Samoa. At the outset, I would like to extend the sincere appreciation of my government to the government and people of Japan, especially the citizens of Wakayama and Hiroshima prefectures, as well as to UNITAR, for this ongoing women's leadership in tsunami-based disaster risk reduction training program, now in its 5th year. Samoa has participated physically in this program since 2016, and only this year has the program held online because of the coronavirus global pandemic that has affected us all. I would also like to thank the organizers of today's event that despite the challenges brought by the pandemic, you enabled the continuation of this program via this online delivery platform to ensure that leadership training, knowledge sharing, and gender mainstreaming in disaster risk reduction and management continues unabated. The World Tsunami Awareness Day, a brainchild of Japan, is celebrated every 5th of November and aims to deepen understanding of tsunamis, raise awareness of the importance of taking precautionary measures against tsunamis and natural disasters, and share innovative approaches to risk reduction. Samoa is delighted to participate in celebrating this year's World Tsunami Awareness Day. Climate change and extreme weather events are realities that we are facing every day, from cyclones, floods, earthquakes, and tsunamis to sea level rise, sea level intrusions, droughts, and changes in weather and rainfall patterns. Samoa's geographical location and volcanic origins is attributed to not only the natural beauty of our country, but also to its vulnerability to natural hazards and the impacts of climate change that threaten the livelihoods of our communities, economy, infrastructure, environment, and even life. Samoa too has experienced the ravages and the tragedy of a tsunami, and our lessons learned from that tragic event in 2009, the 2012 tropical cyclone Evan, and other extreme weather events helped guide key policy direction and risk reduction strategies towards disaster preparedness, response, recovery, reconstruction, and to build back better. The Samoa National Action Plan for Disaster Risk Management for 2017 to 2021, the National Disaster Management 2017 to 2020, and the Strategy for Development of Samoa, mainstream DRR, resilient development and disaster awareness and response into our national development planning processes that includes all layers of society, ensuring no one is left behind. For Samoa, we promote a human rights approach to our sustainable development. Our commitment to the principle of leaving no one behind can only be realized through gender equality and empowerment of women and girls, given that they constitute nearly half of our population. We embrace and align our efforts to existing policy frameworks such as the Samoa Pathway, the Framework for Resilient Development in the Pacific, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the Palm 8 Declaration, where Japan and Pacific leaders committed to cooperation on disaster risk reduction in strengthening the basis for our resilient and sustainable development. Therefore, this UNITAR's Women's Leadership Training Program has been an invaluable in creating awareness, educating, and for sharing innovative approaches to disaster risk reduction amongst its participants, including Samoa. As primary caregivers and members and leaders in the community, involving women in decision-making process and capacity building for disaster response at community level is critical. This program also contributes to the implementation of relevant SDGs on the full and effective participation of women for leadership, promoting sustainable communities, quality education, and climate action. So today, as we remember the Inamura no Hi, we are reminded of the importance of transformative, inclusive policies to invest in resilient infrastructure, early warning systems, and education to ensure more resilient societies and communities. Domo arigato gozaimasu. Tofa soifua.
Thank you very much. Now we are going to play a video message from the second guest speaker, His Excellency Dr. Tevita Suka Manzisi. He is Ambassador of Tonga to Japan. Thank you. Please play the message.
It is a pleasure for me to provide some opening remarks this evening as we commemorate the World Tsunami Awareness Day. At the outset, we would like to express our appreciation to the people and the government of Japan and Wakayama and Hiroshima prefectures for making this timely and important public session possible. Tsunami risk in Tonga is rated as extreme. This is because Tonga lies about 200 kilometers west of the Tonga Trench fault zone. Tonga Trench is a potential source for a marine landslide caused by earthquakes or volcanic eruptions which could trigger a tsunami. Tonga was hit by a tsunami on the 29th September 2009, generated by a submarine earthquake of a 9.0 magnitude on the Richter scale. The tsunami hit our northernmost islands, killing 9 people. 90% of homes on the main island were damaged, affecting the entire population. The lack of structural preparedness was telling. Tsunami preparedness also involves the awareness component, which may be improved by not only educating the public about the nature and threat of the hazard, but also on safe behavior to be adopted in case of an event. The government of Tonga is taking some measures towards this direction. Since the initiation of the World Tsunami Day, the National Emergency Management Office, or NEMO, has been commemorating the National Tsunami Day, organizing different tsunami awareness activities both at national as well as community levels. NEMO and the Department of Communications are currently implementing the nationwide Early Warning System, or NEWS project, to introduce a multi-hazard impact forecast and warning system. The aim is to strengthen both national and regional early warning systems, creating common approaches to warning services among the participating countries wherever possible. Tsunami drill simulation exercises, together with other preparedness activities, have been carried out by NEMO in many schools and communities since 2009. NEMO had planned a national-wide tsunami drill this year to allow testing of newly installed early warning communication equipment, as well as generating greater tsunami awareness and response in Tonga. Unfortunately, due to the impact of COVID-19, this has been postponed to early next year subject to precautionary measures. It is clear that early preparedness to appropriately manage the onset of a tsunami and minimize possible loss of life and property has clear linkages to Tonga's continued work towards achieving its SDGs. That said, however, we understand that more work needs to be done at both the policy and implementation levels. In that sense, I conclude my remarks by stressing the importance of the ongoing genuine and durable partnership with the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. This crucial partnership also includes the important nexus and in-depth collaboration between the UNDRR and UNITAR's seminal training program implementation on women's leadership. The leadership of women during these challenging times of disaster strengthen the holistic approach any country takes in facing and overcoming tsunamis. Let me close by wishing you all a very fruitful and productive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to express sincere appreciation to the messages from Ambassador of Samoa and also Ambassador of Tonga to Japan. Thank you so much. The next video message is from Nikhil Seth, who is Assistant Secretary General of the United Nations and also UNITA Executive Director. Please play the message. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nikhil Seth, and I am the Executive Director of the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, also known as UNITAR. I welcome you to join the 5th session of UNITAR Ideas That Matter series on pursuing the inclusive DRR actions, commemorating World Tsunami Awareness Day 2020 in collaboration with the United Nations Office of Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDRR. On behalf of UNITAR, I would first like to express our concern and solidarity to fight with these unprecedented difficulties caused by COVID-19. It is important that we, hand in hand, work together to build and sustain the new normal and achieve a more resilient society. In 2015, the UNGA designated 5th November as the World Tsunami Awareness Day and has called on all countries, international bodies, and civil society to observe the day in order to raise tsunami awareness and share innovative approaches to risk reduction. Today's public session is our commitment to this wonderful initiative. I'm also delighted to announce the inauguration of the 2020 cycle of our DRR program, UNITAR Women's Leadership, a tsunami-based disaster risk reduction training program that is launched on this important day by UNITAR's Division for Prosperity. More than 100 female participants from Pacific Small Island Developing States, SIDS, will learn key skills to develop an inclusive country DRR plan and to demonstrate leadership in case of disaster events. I would like to highlight that this public session, as well as the program, are supported by the people and government of Japan. UNITAR is extremely grateful for the financial contribution by the people and government of Japan, not only for this initiative, but also for various UNITAR initiatives. The World Tsunami Awareness Day was inspired by Japan, where due to its repeated bitter experience, has over the years built major expertise in areas such as tsunami early warning, public action, and building back better after a disaster to reduce future impacts. Tsunamis are relatively rare events, yet the ratio of dead to injured is often much greater once it happens compared to other natural disasters. The key to defense against any tsunami is building up the preparedness and resilience in communities and to leave no one behind. All of society engagement is essential in DRR planning. I'm therefore excited about this public session as we have distinguished panelists who will share their expertise and experience in disaster risk reduction from different points of view. Speaking of the DRR program, this program marks the 5th cycle this year. Unlike previous cycles where we have trained more than 120 women, participants are not able to visit disaster-affected areas in Japan due to travel restrictions imposed by the pandemic. Instead, we have transformed the program to fit in our new normal. The program will be delivered fully online using the ADAPT micro-learning platform and other online tools geared with new technologies such as virtual reality, which can take participants to a virtual tour of Japan. It is our wish that participants will make use of learning from today's session to strengthen disaster resilience of your communities and contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Let me welcome you once again and thank you for your keen interest.
Thank you very much. I would like to echo what Nikhil said. Disaster risk reduction is critical, particularly at this time that we are facing the pandemic. And would like to express sincere appreciation to the government and people of Japan for supporting UNITA's training program for disaster risk reduction once again. Thank you so much. The next video message is from Mr. Andy McElroy, who is Head of Pacific Sub-Regional Office of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction.
So good evening and greetings from Suva, Fiji here in the Pacific. My name is Andy McElroy and I am the head of the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction here in the Pacific. And it's my pleasure to record this short video to mark the 5th UNITA Ideas That Matter series, and with a real focus on inclusive disaster risk reduction to mark this very important day, World Tsunami Awareness Day, that has been marked around the globe and also here in the Pacific. I would like to start by saluting UNITA's initiative to really strengthen women's leadership in terms of tsunami risk. Women and girls suffer disproportionately from all disasters, and tsunamis are no exception. And some of the work that UNDRR with our partners, UN Women and the Red Cross have been doing in the Solomon Islands here in the Pacific, which faces great tsunami risk, is really showing that we need to do much more to understand the vulnerability, but also the capacity of girls and women in communities across our exposed region. With that greater understanding and that ability to access the experience, the wisdom and the expertise of girls and women around the Pacific, that would be a really big positive step towards reducing tsunami risk in this region. Over the last 20 years, we've had 2 major tsunamis that are really reminding us what a great risk these major disasters happen, albeit they are rare, but when they do occur, the impact is really significant. In both Samoa and Papua New Guinea, communities really saw the negative effects of tsunami and have taken years and years to recover, and in many respects, that recovery is still ongoing today. So I would just like to conclude this short video message. I know you have an outstanding panel to raise the issue and develop it further. Again, I would like to really acknowledge UNITA's leadership to really sort of strengthen women, the role of women in terms of inclusive tsunami disaster risk reduction. It's a major step forward, and my office here in Fiji commits to fully supporting this initiative on an ongoing basis. So I will conclude there, and again offer my very best wishes from here in Fiji, and again on this very important World Tsunami Awareness Day. Let's keep working to really try to reduce and prevent the risk from this really devastating natural hazard. Thank you very much and good evening.
Thank you so much. I would like to highlight that UNITA and UNDRR have been collaborating, particularly for this important topic of women's leadership in disaster risk reduction. They have been extremely helpful, not only on substantive topic, but also coordination and many other aspects. So thank you very much for your generous support. Great. So we are moving to the second part of the public session, which is a short presentation from the three guest speakers. And I am delighted to announce that Dr. Rajiv Shah is now with us today. So Dr. Shah, welcome on board. And we are very much looking forward to hearing from you, your extensive knowledge and experience in disaster risk reduction. If you are ready, could you please start your short presentation? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mihoko-san, and a very good evening to all of you. My sincere congratulations to UNITA to bring this very, very important issue of women's leadership in DRR. But what I would possibly try to focus a little bit on this brief intervention, a little bit of overview of where we are currently in terms of different types of risk. And again, my apology that I became a little bit late. I had a little bit of trouble in between, so but glad that I could join. So what you are seeing here, it is from the GARD report, which is the Global Assessment Report of 2019. And I think this is a very, very important issue, is that this living with uncertainty. So gradually, we are actually entering into the era where there are many different types of uncertainties regarding disaster risk. Some of you might follow this World Economic Forum Global Risk Outlook. So this is this year, 2020. And there are this color coding. The green one are the environmental risk. The blue one is the economic risk. So what you can see is possibly last 4 or 5 years, there are lots of green patches, green boxes. That means that the environmental risks are becoming top 5 in terms of likelihood, the upper part, and in terms of impact. And what are those environmental risks? These are the extreme weather, climate change, natural hazards, biodiversity losses, and human-induced environmental disasters. So needless to say that this environmental risk is becoming very, very sort of prominent in terms of global risk landscape. When you talk about this, in this particular report also, they put this impact and likelihood. And you see, this was this year. This year means, this was this year, January means what was in 2019. So this very infectious disease is somewhere here, which it seems that the impact will be high, but likelihood is low. But I'm sure, I'm very much looking forward actually for next year, January is the World Economic Forum report, that where this particular infectious disease go, whether it will go here or it will possibly cross the boundary of this, the impact and the livelihood. What we are seeing, the impacts of pandemic, global pandemic in our different parts of lives. So this particular word, cascading risk, is becoming very, very important these days. So when you talk about the climate change, the IPCC has 3 specific reports. One was 1.5 degree, one was on land, and one was on ocean. And it focuses on that the whole Asia-Pacific region will have more stronger typhoon, more rainfall, more heat wave, and so on. Then there were quite a bit of work which has been done on the health-related issue. So there are 2 documents at the global and the local level by WHO. Both of them were published last year on the health emergency and disaster risk management. And incidentally, we published a book with myself and one of my colleagues on public health and disasters in January this year. And we never thought that this whole year we will be talking about public health and disaster related issues. And then there is another risk which is coming out very strongly. And this is an Asia-Pacific regional framework for NATEC, which is the natural hazards induced technological risk. So in one way, currently what we are seeing a prolonged pandemic, then the climate stresses, and then also other geological hazards like earthquake and tsunamis. We have seen that just a couple of weeks or maybe last week in Turkey, there was a major earthquake which induced a smaller tsunami. And then also this NATEC risk is becoming also very, very important. So this cascading part of this risk is very important. So I have three specific other message for this Asia Pacific region. One is that emphasizing on the local issue about the global framework. So if you see all the global framework, the Sustainable Development Goals, Sendai Framework, and Paris Agreement. So there are a very strong focus on the local issue, which talks about 10 times in SDG, 48 times in Sendai, and 9 times in the Paris Agreement. And so the important part is that although we have this global framework, the local interventions, the local community, local authorities, local adaptation, local culture becomes very, very important. The second point is this adaptive governance. It's addressing the cascading risk. These are some of the work which we are currently doing in a city in southern part of Japan, in Kumamoto, which was hit by a major flooding this year in July, in the first week of July. So there have been lots of new ways of managing the evacuation center, then the volunteer management, different types of data management, and we have never experienced about that. And there is no guideline available for that. So this adaptation, adaptive governance becomes very, very important. And I'm sure that we will possibly see in our lifetime different types of other risk, and new adaptive governance will be very much required. And the final one is this inclusiveness. And this is an example again from Japan, a prefecture called Kochi Prefecture. What you are seeing here, that Kochi has possibly one of the lowest digital media penetration. Kochi Prefecture has possibly one of the highest aged population. And what about the tsunami risk? The worst case scenario, what we call the Nangkai, Tokai, and To Nangkai. So there are these three fault lines. When it breaks together, there will be a 35-meter tsunami within 9 minutes. 35-meter tsunami within 9 minutes. So you can imagine that with this high aged population, with this low penetration of the digital, like the mobile phone or especially the smartphones, so what will be the situation? So I think the inclusiveness becomes very, very important. The inclusiveness, whether it is about the age, whether it is about the gender, whether it is about the physically or mentally challenged people. So I think the inclusiveness is also a very, very important issue, not only for Japan, for all over the Asia Pacific region. So in summary, there are these few points. One is this living with uncertainty, and this multidisciplinary collaboration is very important. Importance of the local initiative in the global framework for the Asia Pacific region is also very crucial. Adaptive governance is extremely important to address different types of cascading risk. So it's not just one isolated risk like earthquake or tsunami or typhoon. So we have to see in different types of spectrum, and the inclusive approach in disaster risk reduction is very, very important. So I will stop here for the time being. Over to you, Miyako-san. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Sho. Thank you for sharing with us what is happening at the global, regional, and also local levels. It's clear that people are facing multiple risks and how we have to cope with complex situations. And you mentioned keywords such as NATEC, cascading risks, how to tailor to the local situation, adaptive governance, inclusiveness. So thank you so much. We would very much like to come back to these issues and discuss further. So thank you. We would like to move to Mr. Morita to hear experiences of Wakayama Prefecture.
Mr. Morita, please start.
Hello, I am very pleased to join this event today. I am Morita Yasutomo, Superintendent of Emergency Management, Wakayama Prefecture Government, Japan. I would like to take this opportunity to talk about the story of Inamura no Hi in relation to the designation of the World Tsunami Awareness Day and status of Nangkai Trough earthquakes. Now, please allow me to talk in Japanese. まず
Let me first of all explain about Wakayama Prefecture. Wakayama Prefecture is located on the western side of Kii Hanto, which is the largest peninsula in Japan. Wakayama Prefecture stretches from north to south and is blessed with abundant nature such as ocean, mountain, and rivers. It has a lot of appeals, including rich cultural assets like World Heritage sites, popular tourist spots, spas, and restaurants. But on the other hand, it is exposed to natural disasters and has been repeatedly hit by typhoons, storms, and floods. Also, we have had big earthquakes called Nangkai Trough earthquake with tsunamis at regular intervals and suffered devastating damages in the past. Now, let me share with you the story of fire of rice sheaves related to tsunamis in Wakayama. As was mentioned in the opening remarks, as you know, on the 22nd of December 2015, the 70th UN General Assembly designated November the 5th as the World Tsunami Awareness Day to raise global awareness about tsunami. The designation was actually inspired by the story of fire of rice sheaves about heroic efforts of Mr. Sakaguchi Goryo following the Ansei Nangkai earthquake that hit Hirokawa town of Wakayama. On the 5th of November 1854, Wakayama was hit by a major earthquake. After a strong and persistent earthquake subsided, Sakaguchi Goryo went out to inspect the village and its coast. Then he saw a tide receding from the shoreline into the ocean, and instantly he knew tsunami was on its way. To alert villagers of imminent danger, he lit freshly harvested rice sheaves on fire to tell them to evacuate. Back then, rice straws were valuable materials to make daily necessities like footwear and raincoats. Surprised to see valuable rice sheaves on fire, villagers gathered to high grounds, only to see tsunami engulfing the village to disappear. Goryo's quick decision and sacrificing spirit saved many lives. But the story does not end there. After the earthquake, he spent his money and orchestrated the effort to build tentative shelters of the affected villagers and construct embankments, levees, and worked so hard for early recovery and construction of the village and helped those who lost jobs. Based on this story, November the 5th was designated as Tsunami Awareness Day in Japan too. This story was described by Lafcadio Hearn in his book entitled A Living God in 1897 and spread in the world. In Japan, the story of fire of rice sheaves was adopted as a teaching material for primary school children and played a role in DRM education. Next, let me explain about Nangkai Trough earthquake. Off the southern coast of Wakayama, there is a part of Philippine Sea Plate sinking under Eurasia Plate at the pace of about 4 centimeters a year. This interface or boundary is called Nangkai Trough, which forms an active seismogenic zone at the depth of 4,000 meters. In designing our countermeasures, we assume earthquake of magnitude 8 on the Richter scale with a hypocentral region in Nangkai Trough. Earthquake of this size occurs more or less regularly every 90 to 150 years. It's been announced that the probabilities of occurrence of earthquake of magnitude 8 to 9 within 30 years from now stand at 70 to 80% as of January 2020. and the possibility of an even bigger earthquake named Nangkai Trough mega earthquake was announced by the government's Central Disaster Prevention Council in 2012. This would be the largest earthquake for Japan with magnitude 9.1. But the earthquake of this scale has not been recorded in the past several thousands of years, and the frequency of such a quake is considered lower by more than one digit compared to repeatedly occurring mega earthquakes in Wakayama. By simulating the damages of these earthquakes, we are reinforcing the levees, designated tsunami evacuation buildings, develop evacuation routes and towers. Also, using information obtained from quake and tsunami monitoring system called DoNet, we send emergency alert mails to citizens' smartphones and cell phones. So in this way, we hand down the great story and spirit of Hamaguchi Goryo to our posterity and make sure we are prepared to disasters to save lives and properties of people of Wakayama. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have visited Wakayama Prefecture personally and visited the museum of Hamaguchi Goryo, and it was very, very interesting. I also had an opportunity to meet with local communities and learn various disaster risk reduction initiatives that people are undertaking. It's also very interesting to hear that Wakayama Prefecture is promoting not only structural measures, but also soft measures, particularly harnessing digital technologies. So thank you. We would like to ask more about these various innovative initiatives from you. So thank you so much. Okay, so now we would like to hear from Ms. Eun Hideyos about various initiatives that her country, Palau, is implementing to promote inclusive disaster risk reduction. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mihoko. I would like to show my presentation. Yes. Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alung Hidayos, and I am a UNITAR alumni from 2018, as well as a graduate student of Sophia University in Japan. And right now, I am based in Palau. I was able to come back in August due to the pandemic, and I'm working online as well as doing my research here at the moment. So next slide, please. So I will just touch base on three of Palau's past disasters: Typhoon Bofa, Typhoon Haiyan, and a severe drought in 2016. And if you can move on to the next slide. So Typhoon Bofa happened in December of 2012, where about 112 houses were completely damaged. 131 people were in temporary shelters, and 136 houses were with major damage. And as you can see on the map here, this is sort of the map of Palau, and what was hit was the southern islands, as well as sort of the northeast islands, island states. And I'm actually from one of the northern islands, northern states called Ngarard. And at the time I was in high school, and I remember I was living in Koror, in the sort of town, the city, and which is sort of south. And we had to, our house was made out of wood, and we needed to stay in a cement house during the time of the typhoon. And so what we did was we stayed with my grandma, who was living in an apartment, a cement apartment during the time. And we stayed with her, and I remember staying up and hearing the winds very strong. And this typhoon was actually one of the strongest since since the 90s. And one of the things about this is this typhoon was it was during a time of the holidays, so many people were home, and it was sort of, in a way, sort of the relief and recovery efforts in it afterwards. It was budgeted up to $10 million US dollars. And if you can go to the next slides, I have some pictures. Um, so yes, so the pictures, these are actually pictures that I remember seeing in real life. After the day of the typhoon, my grandpa wanted to check his beach house up north. And what we did was we drove up, and when we went to the house, the roof was on the ground. So the whole house collapsed and it was all damaged. And I remember driving towards the rural areas, and I can see refrigerators in the forest and trash everywhere. And it was um, sort of an incredible thing to see as a high school student, and sort of imagining if it could have gotten worse. Fortunately, nobody was harmed. It was just house damages, as well as schools were damaged too. The school in Grad up north, where I'm from, was actually the evacuation site for the local village. However, it was flooded with seawater, so many of them had to move more inland to a different evacuation site. Next slide, please. And Typhoon Haiyan was the next disaster that happened a year apart from Typhoon Bopha, which was next year in 2013 in November. And this was not as strong as Typhoon Bopha in Palau, but the most northern island state of Kayang was the most damaged state, where all of the people that lived on that island had to evacuate to Koror, which is the city or the town. And about 415 homes were damaged, and 39 of which were completely destroyed. And on Kayangal Island, 22 of those houses were damaged, and um, the damage costs were up to almost $6 million across the 6 sectors of education, utilities, health, agriculture, public works, and housing. And the thing with typhoons is also very destructive towards taro patches and farms. Taro is Palau's main staple of carbohydrates, and when saltwater intrusion and storm surges come in, it kills everything, all the crops and all the food. So that was another issue that was raised in these 2 typhoons back to back. Next slide will show some pictures from Typhoon Haiyan. Yeah, so as you can see here, here's a picture of a house where it had a restroom and the whole house was destroyed, and you can see the toilet there. Houses fell, roofs were damaged, cars were also damaged by all the powerful winds and the things flying. And this sort of really sort of opened my eyes to what types of strategies and management for disaster risk reduction were in place at the time, and I was in high school. And actually in 2012, I was able to participate in a youth summit in Japan for Tsunami Awareness. So when I was in high school, I was able to fly to Japan and visit disaster affected sites a year after the great Eastern tsunami and earthquake in Japan. And a year after, I went to these places and I remember they still look like this, very damaged. And it was sort of a point in my life where I started to think about environment and how climate change impacts disasters a lot, especially for small island states. Can you please go to the next slide? So the severe drought that happened in 2016, it was during the time I was actually in Hawaii for my undergrad. And so I remember talking with my family in Palau, and they're talking about how there was water hours and there was not a lot of water. And on March 21st in 2016, the drought levels were 3 out of 4, which was the lowest recorded rainfall since 1951 at 17.16 inches. And I remember many of my family in the US were starting to send packages of water bottles to Palau. That's how bad it got. And our dams and our water sources were becoming empty, and that was very scary for me because I wasn't home to help my family. So in a way, it was very scary. And on the environmental side, we have the famous Jellyfish Lake, which is a big tourist site in Palau and one of the more famous sites in Palau. And that was impacted by the severe drought too, because lots of the jellyfish were dying. There wasn't enough rain and water for them. And because of that, they had to close it down from tourists. And it has become I know now they're doing research in counting the jellyfish and they're coming back. So that is a good sign. However, these severe droughts, if they do get worse in the future, um, that could really have damage towards not just towards our human health, but also towards our economy and tourism and other sectors. Next slide, please. And so my experience in DRR training in 2018 was an incredible experience for me at being starting at such a young age. I was working with other island states and other women, especially, and being able to work with them and learning from Japan was one of the um, sort of eye-opening experiences for me to be able to link all the missing links and connections in DRR in Palau and to be able to bring it back. So for me, when I went in, I only had experience or when I went in high school for the Tsunami Awareness and the Youth Summit. So this DRR training was one of the first experiences for me to learn more about disaster risk and what kind of measures can be done. So for me in Palau, I worked in civil society. So I really thought of ways how we can work with community and children. And if you can go to the next slide, I think I have some pictures when we went to Wakayama Prefecture. And that experience we did was we participated in the evacuation drill, as well as go to the Hiromura embankment to help with the sand. And that experience for me were with the kids, even though I didn't really speak Japanese, I could tell it was a very important event for the kids to learn and to see what they can do starting from a young age and in DRR, as well as management and risk reduction. Next slide, please. I think. So my future plans, because my background is in more into environment, I think I would want to, my future plans are to do more restoration and conservation work on land and in the ocean that connect with DRR. And um, be able to work in policy as well. That's what my master's, my graduate school is focusing on, policy as well as environmental conservation. And that's what I want to focus on, as well as doing environmental NDR education, because I like working with kids, and I can really see, I like to make education learning fun. So every time I'm working with kids and I always see their smiles on their faces and sort of they're asking questions about environment or other things. It's really sort of my passion to be able to work with kids and community as well. Okay, next slide. And I think that is the end of my presentation. Thank you. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you so much, El-Eung, for a wonderful presentation. Many interesting points came out from your presentation. You are representing the young generation, El-Eung, and as a future leader, you participated in the training program. You went to Wakayama and learned lessons from various activities Wakayama has been implementing. You also emphasized that Palau and many SIDS countries are facing increasing extreme weathers, such as typhoons and drought, and the frequency and intensity of these extreme weathers will increase because of climate change. So that's also an important point. The role of women and also youth can play in promoting disaster risk reduction is also critical. So I thank you so much. And thank you so much for all the speakers for a short presentation. Now we would like to move to the next part, which is more questions and discussions among ourselves. I would like to ask all the speakers a couple of questions. And the first question is about COVID-19 and disaster risk reduction. Everyone is living in this very challenging and difficult, uncertain situation. And everyone is thinking what is going to happen if natural disaster hits. What should we do? So it's a very complicated, very difficult question for everyone. So well, firstly, I would like to hear from Dr. Shaw. Dr. Shaw, could you tell us if we are getting any lessons learned at the global or regional or even national level in terms of how to cope better with COVID-19 and natural hazards? So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mihako-san. I think very recently we did a work with UNDRR and jointly with WHO, and very precisely trying to bring these two community, health and disaster risk reduction, together. And we prepared some sort of guiding note for incorporating the health hazard into the National Disaster Risk Reduction Plan. And that time we were actually analyzing many country responses, but also the local responses, like city level responses in many countries. So I will say that although in Sendai framework, we had very strong focus on health issue. If you just use the word health, and if you just search the whole Sendai framework, I searched it, it comes 78 times in 32-page document, 78 times in 32-page document. As you can imagine that how strongly health was focused in Sendai framework. But very unfortunately, very few countries have actually used Sendai framework to respond to the COVID-19. Most of the country use their own infectious disease control framework. Even Japan, what Japan did was our infectious disease control framework, both at the national level and all the prefecture level, including Tokyo Metropolitan Government. So I see that although there was an awareness at the disaster group that yes, we need to incorporate more on the health hazard, but from the health perspective, to actually considered this pandemic as a disaster, that awareness was not there. It was not there globally, it was not there regionally, it was not there nationally. But when you come to the local level, local responses, because what we have seen is that when this pandemic started, we have seen that many other collateral hazards, like we have seen typhoon or cyclone, we have seen flooding happening, we have seen heat wave in many countries, and very recently earthquake and tsunami as well, like Turkey and so on. So that time, I think the local governments, they were possibly more responsive to bring these two things together, the pandemic as well as the disaster risk reduction. And Japan is a classic example. Like at the national level, there is no specific guideline to bring these two things together. But as I mentioned, when you go to Kumamoto Prefecture, I talked to the prefecture government, I talked to the local government. So they made their own sort of recipe or own guideline that how to make the evacuation or how to make the shelter management, so that during the infection, the more air circulations is there in the shelter, or the little bit of distance, proper distancing is maintained in the shelter so that outside people doesn't come. So these were all learning by doing. So my main interpretation from these different types of work is that at the community level, at the local government level, when it comes to the pandemic and the disaster risk reduction, it synergizes. But when it goes to the upper governance level, at the national or in the regional or in the global level, I think we need to do more. So I will stop here for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shaw. It's very interesting to hear that local communities, local authorities are front line in synergizing and promoting pandemic risks and natural disasters. So thank you so much. And that's a perfect perfect timing, because now we would like to hear from Mr. Morita regarding how Wakayama Prefecture is preparing for and promoting disaster risk reduction in the time of COVID-19. So over to you, Mr. Morita.
Mr. Morita, please. Yes, thank you. I would like to talk about specific countermeasures taken by Wakayama Prefecture. So with regard to the pandemic, in Wakayama as well, for the first time, we had an infection patient in February this year. Since then, the COVID-19 spread within the prefecture. We asked people to stay home and temporarily close their businesses to seek cooperation from citizens. And also, prefecture and medical institutions cooperate in order to stop the spread. In Wakayama Prefecture, usually from June, we have a long rainy season, and till October, we would have a typhoon season. So heavy rains and typhoon may cause disasters. In that case, many citizens affected would come to shelters operated by municipalities. And in Wakayama, in shelters, in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19, we have introduced various new measures. For instance, we check body temperature and health conditions when people check in the shelters. And also, per family, we have a 2-meter interval, and we have partition between families. Regarding partitions, the prefectural government purchased partitions and distributed to shelters as emergency measures. And also hand washing and cough etiquette, and also cleaning and disinfection of living space is thoroughly done. Therefore, we strengthen hygienic management at shelters. And every day for each evacuee, we conduct health check. If they have fever, we ask them to move to a private room. So these 4 measures have been newly introduced to our guideline. And because of the countermeasures, we can only accommodate fewer people at the shelters. However, we are now trying to open many more shelters and newly designate evacuation centers, and we may use hotels and inns so that we can raise capacity of evacuation facilities. And this is what we are asking to municipalities. So when disaster occurs or disaster is imminent, in order to evacuate, we have to ask people to evacuate to save their own lives from imminent danger without worrying too much about the COVID-19. Therefore, evacuation is more important. So in this way, we are taking the thorough countermeasures for the pandemic at the shelters. So we are asking citizens to take shelter, to make evacuation without any hesitation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morita. It's very interesting to hear what kind of social distancing, physical distancing Wakayama Prefecture has introduced, and also ensuring safety measures to cope better with COVID-19 and the natural hazards. I think local authorities are learning by doing. So thank you so much for sharing your experience. Now, we'd like to move to Ms. Hideyos to hear what is happening in Palau and the other 6 countries. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mihoko. So in Palau, right now, we are one of the few countries that are still COVID-free. And it was weird for me to be in Japan and then fly back to Palau from a high-risk area to an area that has no COVID. So sometimes I start to forget that there's a pandemic going around in the world, but there are some measures that Palau has taken while this pandemic is happening. We are trying to practice social distancing. Many of the stores and the businesses have those 6 feet apart signs, as well as Bank of Hawaii is the only business I know that requires a mask to go in. And so some of the things like this past September was a national preparedness month, and their theme was focusing on COVID-19 prevention. So they did have a fair and parade with their theme as disasters don't wait, prepare today. And some of the activities they aimed at schools and the youth and communities, where schools were doing emergency plan testing, like drills, fire drills, and evacuation drills. And for teachers and school staffs to do CPR training and update their CPR and first aid certificates. In the past, the Palau Healthcare Coalition, they focused more on natural disasters like typhoons, but because of the pandemic, they focused more on COVID-19 prevention and cleanliness and sanitation for people in homes and communities. However, there has been sort of the economy for Palau has suffered a lot because in the beginning of the year, Palau closed their borders fast. So there were no flights coming as early as of March 2020. And they've been slowly bringing back people. And I was one of the lucky ones to come back to Palau in August. And when I came, I had to be in quarantine for 2 weeks in a government mandatory quarantine hotel. And after that, I was released to my home, but I had to do self-quarantine for another week. and I was tested more than 4 times. So the measures that Palau is taking for slowly opening up the flights I've seen have really sort of changed, and they're more strict on it. And I think that's a good thing, especially for doing preventive measures in the islands, because sometimes I know it can sort of be difficult, or there can be problems with being able to follow rules and being strict. And so when I came, I was doing my quarantine, and then I did my testing. And when I was released, I was able to start working on my research and stuff, and my school online. So I know that recently Marshall Islands has some cases of COVID-19. I have some friends that are living there, and they've told me that many people are freaking out and they're scared. And I could understand, because on the islands, it's really hard to be prepared for disasters or these types of issues. And it's also, I'm scared for it to come here, because for myself, I'm not sure if Palau is ready if COVID-19 were to come to Palau. And so when I did come, I was also very nervous, because I didn't know how people would react when they see me. And when I came out of quarantine, I was nervous to be around people. And when I was in Japan, I always wore my mask and I tried to stay away from big crowds. So when I came here, I still had that sense of not being around many people. So I think being able to, and I know that the community when there's people that come from off island, they do want to talk to the people that were in quarantine and ask them about their experience. So I think being able to talk with the community and tell them how our experiences went could also help them prepare for if COVID were to come to Palau. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations to the people of Palau for zero COVID cases so far. And it is always important to prepare for the worst case scenario. But thank you so much for your input. Now, we would like to move quickly to the next topic, which is build back better. So when a disaster happens, both biological, geological, or climate hazard, when we recover from it, it is crucial to promote so-called build back better, meaning to make sure your societies, countries, economies, every system is more resilient to future disasters than before. So I would like to ask here, Dr. Rajiv. So this build back better. How is it working? What are, particularly looking at global, regional, national experiences that have come out, and when you think of successful cases, what are key elements that have successfully made build back better? And also, can we learn lessons from those experiences as we fight with COVID-19?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Actually, that nowadays I am hearing that in many countries, they don't like the word now build back better, because they see something backward looking. So there is a new term many of the countries are using, like bouncing forward. So it's like more futuristic looking or more positive looking. But anyway, the essence is the same, that how we can make our recovery more inclusive, more development oriented, and more positive looking. I always say that any disaster is a development opportunity. Either it is used or it is misused. So depending on the country's policy, depending on the financial support, depending on possibly different types of innovation, sometimes it is a well-used development opportunity, or sometimes it is misused development opportunity. So I will point out two specific things or two specific points here. One is like, although for COVID-19, like we have seen lots of different types of impact in all the different SDGs, whether it is starting from the hunger or education or gender related issue or cities and so on. It virtually affected all the SDGs differentially. But there have been quite a bit of fiscal boosting or fiscal stimulus package, which different countries have actually started. Some countries have done it internally with their own development fund. Some countries have possibly done it a different proportion of certain internal and certain possibly external aid, borrowing possibly funding from major financial agencies like World Bank or development banks or IMF and so on. And maybe some of the countries who had to actually depend more on the aid, the external assistance rather than their own internal fiscal stimulus. But whatever the country's condition is, I think this fiscal stimulus is a very, very important part. And we are currently analyzing the fiscal stimulus in South Asia and Southeast Asia and try to understand that how this is actually helping in their recovery. And we found that Japan is a classic example where if you take the number-wise, Japan's fiscal stimulus is almost 40% of the national GDP, which is actually a big amount. On an average, in most of the Asia-Pacific region, we are seeing the stimulus package is between 10 to 12% of their national GDP. Sometimes, of course, some countries are less than 10, 3%, 4%, and so on. But the Japan, this particular number, it's not only just like Japan, it's not that the Japan is actually arranging that big amount. But it is, Japan had some already existing development programs. So this particular stimulus is actually enhancing those development programs. So my argument here that a possibly better recovery will be done in the country if they can channelize their fiscal stimulus to their already existing development programs. And that is very, very important, not to start something new. Because every country has their own development program to strengthen them and to make it more resilient, whether it is the physical, whether it is the social, whether it is the economic, whether it is the environmental, different types of development program to strengthen that. So that's my first argument, that if it is incorporated or linked to the already existing program, it works very well. So that's on the fiscal stimulus part. My second point is the recovery also, like this whole pandemic, actually, there are many lockdowns in different places, but possibly one lockdown was not possible, which was the innovation, the new idea. So there was no lockdown on innovation. And we see that this particular pandemic possibly generated different types of new innovations in different countries. Lots of new things are coming up. And especially since we have a very young colleague here, so this youth participation, youth and innovation has become a really big boost in many, many different countries. And I am very optimistic that if the country is able to use their youth power, their youth mind, and this innovation together, I think then this build back better or bounce forward, whatever terminology we use, I think it will go in a proper way. So these two parts, one is the fiscal boosting and another one is this strong focus on the innovation. So these will possibly define the future pathways of the countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shaw. Thank you. So building on existing programs rather than reinventing the wheel, and also innovation. Those are two key words. Thank you. Now, I would like to move to Mr. Morita, because Wakayama Prefecture is leading local authority to prepare for disaster risk reduction. And one important aspect is technological innovation. So I would like to hear from you what kind of technological innovations Wakayama Prefecture has been introducing, and any other innovations that the prefecture has adopted to prepare for disaster risk. So thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Wakayama Prefecture, how are we preparing for disasters? And also, after the disaster occurs, how we are trying to rebuild our prefecture. That's what I would like to talk about. But first of all, in Wakayama Prefecture, we have to prepare for disasters, including Nangkai Trough earthquake. In order to promote preparedness, we came up with a support program called Escape from Tsunamis. We are aiming for 0 tsunami victims, and we are introducing various countermeasures. When it comes to tsunami, there are some coastal cities and towns which would see the arrival of tsunami in several minutes. Therefore, we have to identify areas where people do not have enough time to evacuate, and in order to fill the gap, over a 10-year period from 2014 to 2024, we are engaged in various activities. On the hard side, we are strengthening levees, and we are improving evacuation routes and towers, and we are making houses more seismic resistant. And next, I want to talk about DONET, which is a tsunami forecast system. In Wakayama, tsunami may arrive some cities or towns within several minutes. Therefore, we have to provide tsunami observation data as quickly as possible. Therefore, we built, as the first prefecture in Japan, the tsunami forecasting system. In implementing this system, we are getting observation data from observation and monitoring system DONET. DONET allows a real-time observation because seismometers and hydraulic gauges are installed on 51 locations on the seafloor of the Kumano-Nada Sea and Kii Channel. So we take observation data from DONET so that we can forecast the size and arrival time of tsunami, and we give such data to coastal towns of Wakayama and firefighting headquarters. So we give such emergency data. Further, we use this data to citizens. If tsunami is observed on the DONET monitoring spots, we can immediately determine the size of a tsunami and give alert mails to citizens so that they can evacuate immediately. Next, I want to talk about Wakayama DRR navigation. And we provide information regarding DRR information like earthquake, tsunami, and flooding. And for the purpose of evacuating accurately and timely, we developed Wakayama Prefecture Disaster Risk Reduction Navigation. That is a smartphone app. And the main function of this app is to display and search nearby evacuation shelters on the map. And also, it can display and navigate the shortest route on the map. Also, if the families are registered, it can confirm the whereabouts of those registered family members, and also it can be used as an evacuation drill. And apart from this Wakayama DRR navigation, from last year, we are using Wakayama DRR Twitter in normal times as well to provide related information. Next, I want to talk about DRR recovery plan, which is made in advance. If reconstruction process takes longer, people may lose energy to reconstruct the community, And therefore, we have to prepare recovery plan in advance so that we can immediately start recovery process after the disaster, and we can prevent the economic activities slump. And together with municipalities, the prefectural government formulate such tsunami disaster recovery plan in advance so that people can live with peace of mind and they can live peacefully. In addition to these efforts, Wakayama Prefecture are introducing various DRR measures. So we can never end DRR efforts because there's nothing like a perfect DRR or perfect preparedness. Therefore, we would like to continue to work by introducing new technologies going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It is incredible to hear that nowadays mobile apps are really changing how people deal with disaster risk reduction. So it's very, thank you very much for sharing experience of Wakayama Prefecture. Now I am, unfortunately, we have run out of time. So we received many questions from the audience, but unfortunately, we will not be able to cover all the questions. But thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and ideas with us. I would like to conclude this public session by final remarks. Just I want to cover just a few points. Well, once again, thank you very much to all the distinguished guest speakers. It was very, very interesting and exciting to hear various ideas, thoughts, lessons coming from global, regional, national, and community levels. Thank you so much. To me, couple of things really stood out. Number one is that we live in the world of multiple uncertainties, multiple hazards. So it is critical to prepare for these multiple risks and prepare better. So that's number one. Technological innovations, not just technology, but other aspects. This is really changing how we promote disaster risk reduction. For example, this app that Wakayama Prefecture has introduced, and many other apps that the world, different places are using to cope with COVID-19 and also various disasters that are changing how we deal with disaster risk reduction, how we promote disaster risk reduction. So that's continued to be key. And finally, the critical role that people are playing, particularly youth, women, and other groups of people. And here, once again, it was a great pleasure to have you on board, El-Un, representing the future generation and also women. And they are really leading and changing. They are change agent for disaster risk reduction. So thank you very much. So I would like to, with this, I would like to close the public session. Once again, thank you very much. And I really, I wish everyone a good day. And please think about today. Again, November 5th is the World Tsunami Awareness Day. So prepare for the worst case scenario. And please stay safe, everyone. Thank you so much.